Are we good?
Yeah, just a moment.
No last minute pickups.
Just forward me the login details again.
So,
yes, the main now. I want to log in there.
kuweka blank.
Sawa.
Disable until we are starting.
Guys are in the waiting room. Let's see the first two. Immediately. Okay.
They open this to avoid these are my first. Somebody has decided to utilize to position to dismantle. Can I get one of those small plates? Sure.
Did you post any keep quiet along the corridor? Anaweza kushika huko screen.
No. Yeah. Okay.
That's on the right.
Okay. Najaribu kukancelia hii moja haiko online. Haiko on internet ya
I don't know.
imetolewa. Oh, ilikuwa keba blue. So hii haina internet.
Inafanya bado.
No, iko kwa disconnect.
Disconnect ndio iangalie. Hiyo blue inafanya.
Call them up with
Hapo
how it goes on.
Iko sawa.
Wait still with it.
connect. Hapo.
When the other people give presenting, will you mute this mic?
So what is it?
Yeah, will you mute it?
Even it's for
So it will be live. Yes. Okay.
Net.
Oh.
I don't to my screen then okay.
You guys, you have 5 minutes. Already?
Hello, guys. We'll solve you move along. Sometimes you don't overthink it. You solve the technical that we move along.
I came in at this time. This something, what did you say before? For this registration.
Yes, we need to register again. No problem.
How many of it? The camera can see it?
Yeah.
Okay, mine.
Just a moment. Yeah, okay.
Put all those lights so that and you know where to look at, where to avoid. Which way is it? You have to look at this place so that to avoid looking.
Mwambie kamera angalia wapi. Kamera. Just this one.
And just take if you can see my board. If you can see the camera is out of focus. Make sure it's not seen.
So kafanya for 2 hours. Nataka mafans watu waone wanakachitu.
And only has the benefit of fasting now being has reduced.
But Barak, internet nayo
is my details.
That's what.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yes.
10 people are waiting.
10 people are waiting.
Yes. Oh, one has left. There are 9. The wait is long.
We love them. We look here. So 7. Or
Yes,
you can go to WhatsApp. Then you use the link there.
Let me admit.
So you tell me when to pick up. Sound is on? Yes.
Yeah, but you tell me when to pick up. Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Speakers for today evening, all protocols observed. Welcome to the AHERI 2021 Fireside Chat. Quite an interesting topic today. We're going to be discussing the pandemic and its effect on internship programs and industrial attachments in Africa's higher education institutions. But first, a bit of background. What is AHERI? So AHERI stands for Africa Higher Education Research Institute, which was founded in 2010. And its key mandate is still about developing a network of higher education researchers across the continent of Africa, but not just stopping in Africa, bringing friends of Africa across the world to discuss and look at how we can improve higher education in the continent. The other mandate is to create and facilitate collaborative research between higher education institutions, again, not within Africa also, but also without. Develop information useful for policy formulation towards focus on development. Last but not least, increase higher education profile as an avenue for development. So today we have a very interesting group of distinguished speakers. Let me just quickly introduce my speakers for today, and then I will introduce my colleague who's sitting on the right side of me, Robert Owino, who is the Executive Director of AHERI. We have today Professor Chacha, Nyaigotti-Chacha, who is Chairman, Commission for University Education in Kenya. I think for me, it's quite pregnant to have Professor Chacha here today because I'm one of his students. So Professor, if you're listening to me, I think you can be proud of yourself. Then we have Nodumo Dhlamini, Director, ICT Services and Knowledge Management, Association of Africa Universities in Ghana. We also have Irene Githinji, Microsoft East Africa, and Irene will give us a case today about how to manage the internship process, industrial attachment from an industry perspective. We have also today Truphie Kwaka-Sumba, who is the principal Nairobi campus, St. Paul's University. Truphie also serves on the board of Longhorn Publishers with myself. We also have Dr. Kevit Desai, who is the Principal Secretary, State Department of Eastern Africa Community, Ministry of East Africa Community and Regional Development. With us today too is Professor Maureen Olel, who is the Dean, School of Education, Maseno University. Last but not least, my colleague, Robert Owino, who is the Institute Director at AHERI. So we're going to have our speakers talk a bit about this specific subject, which is basically the pandemic and its effect on internship programs and industrial attachment in Africa's higher education institutions. Then we have our guests who are still streaming in virtually. We'll give an opportunity for our guests to ask questions virtually, and then we'll have an interactive session at the end of the speakers' conversation with us. So without further ado, I want to hand over to Robert Owino, my colleague. Robert, over to you.
Thanks, Ali, for the introduction and kicking us off. As you have heard, my name is Robert Owino, and I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome all the distinguished speakers and participants, all protocols observed. The idea of a fireside is based on an African culture where normally issues that are affecting the community are discussed, are debated in the evening of a fireside to find out solutions to propel the community or to better the community. And I would like to take this opportunity to just welcome everyone. This will be about 1.5 hour session. And the planning idea or the vision for all colloquia and conferences for AHERI is that we'd like to transform ideas into action. And we've had 3 conferences. And in the inaugural conference, which was on ICT in higher education, we had the idea of community networks. And we are proud to say that this has been changed to a practical solution where we have a community network running within Kisumu. Kisumu is the western part of the country, trying to reach there and south and the south. And we hope that at the end of this fireside chat, we'll all come up with a way forward to advise policy players and also institutions to come up with a solution. How do they address the gaps that exist in internships and industrial attachments because of the COVID pandemic? Indeed, there has been concern that the graduates that transition from school to work are ill prepared for the world of work. One of the things that is coming out is that because of lack of experience, they don't have the soft skills or competences that will make them competitive in the world of work. We have experienced almost 4 cohorts that are affected with this pandemic. And so with the speakers that we have, we'd like to have different perspectives. Our first speaker, Dr. Kevit Desai, who is the Permanent Secretary in the State Department of East Africa Community under the Ministry of East Africa Community and Regional Development, and has quite some interesting background. He was also in the Ministry of Education and has had a long period of time in the industry. So he will come up and give us a perspective from an East African angle. How are the governments going, or how are the governments interacting with the internship challenge? The East African community is open, and we expect that there is mobility of both staff and also students across. And so there's an opportunity that the East African community provides. After Dr. Desai, we have Professor Maureen Olel, who is the Dean of the School of Education, and she'll give us a perspective from an academic institution. What demands are they facing? What challenges are they facing with the diminished opportunities that are there due to COVID-related closures of industry, with the demand that there is work from home? How is it affecting the students' participation in the industrial attachments and the internship programs? So I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Kevit Desai to kick us off. And as we go through the program, please, as our moderator has requested, we expect it to be as interactive as possible. Karibuni.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And great appreciation for and gratitude for being invited to this fireside chat where you're discussing research in Africa as well as the development of education in Africa. And indeed, the fact that you are promoting a community. And I really think that it's what gives us greatest hope. This action of community engagement within the context of finding solutions. Exactly what you're doing, creating a platform that promotes a collective ownership as well as leadership and joint action in order to address this. Let me remind you of an old African saying: it takes a village to bring up a child. And indeed, a nation to build its systems. And so that partnership between government, public sector, private sector, the civil society, similar to what you have within this platform, is, I think, the crux of the matter. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. I'd like to first and foremost recognize and acknowledge Professor Chacha, who I've worked with considerably in university education, the Commission of Higher Education, and also have felt his work in the development of IUCEA, the Inter-University Council for East Africa, one of the oldest pioneering institutions to promote collaboration between the East African states with outcomes of research, education, skills development, and so on. And in many ways, IUCA is the bedrock for the recognition of qualifications and the ability to promote mobility of academics as well as students and professionals throughout East Africa. Indeed, it is a very important discussion that you're having today in the context of what we now witness by way of COVID-19. But I also think prior to COVID-19, there has been various challenges that we all have to recognize with respect to the ongoing development of education in Africa, in particular East Africa. And this was inclusive to the fact that indeed higher education was a premise to getting a good job. But that's in question today. The challenges we face with rising fees and the accruing debt that students face. That was a continuous challenge. The promotion of debts with respect to more risk. The universities themselves, as institutions, spending more beyond their means. And this has had a challenge by way of cultivating capacities for research, skills, and education. The economic challenges that student faces, the salary gaps, the fact that young graduates are increasingly receiving a declining salary return. The challenges we face by way of our economy, declining levels of productivity, innovation, and some of the key areas and issues that have an impact on our competitiveness. Most profound is the challenges we face by way of how university education Is someone playing music? The music sounded very nice, but anyway, I think that let us first have a chat and then listen to the music. So the overall development of universities have focused primarily on certain values that increasingly as communities we need to promote by way of ensuring that not only they play a role as far as the development of legislation and policy, but also the strategy towards implementing such values in order to promote greater prominence of university education. And the values of promoting greater access to university education is absolutely critical. The ability for us to find ways in which a young person, no matter where they're from, the remotest part of this country, can see a pathway to education these are essential by way of ensuring that we're able to promote that demographic dividend, but social mobility for young people into opportunity. The important role of equity by way of ensuring that education is accessible, it's brought to young people as efficiently as possible. There are incredible opportunities today if we look at our existing context, the fact that there's increasingly middle class entitlement to university education. I think this is a positive thing, that capacity for equity is embedded in our overall government capacities. In fact, education takes the highest budget by way of its expenditure in education, not only in Kenya, but I think in most African countries. So that important role of equity, being able to ensure that we condition systems and develop systems to address the needs of young people, and being able to find access to skills, education, and research capacities. The important role of quality, that focus on ensuring that education is holistic, that it's able to be as efficiently transferred and supported to young people. And that very important value of relevance. And I think that much of this has, of course, naturally to do with creating the necessary pathways from no matter which state and stage a person begins, but that important role where young people are confident and that indeed their skills are requisite to labor market as well as social welfare needs. These are some of the values that most policy developers and educational strategists in higher education reform have considerably put a lot of thought to in order to find the necessary systems and structures and create that ecosystem where skills, education, and research could be not only inclusive, but be driven by needs of society and the economy, indeed resilient and sustainable by way of their development. Within this context, the need for education is undoubtedly one of the most important qualities towards transformation. And you can see increasingly that education plays a significant role beyond, contextually what we know of, but increasingly now as an urgent requirement to resolve and solve many of the challenges we face. To illustrate further, we're now at this phase where we're questioning the deterioration and the sustainability of our resources, for example, and how we're able to create circular economies, where the environment, social inclusion, as well as the economic inclusion is in balance in order to create a more sustainable world. And therefore, it's only education, the frontiers of research and skills development and education that can actually profoundly contribute to these new challenges that we face at a global level, but also the fact that we are faced with other kinds of challenges like climate change, as well as the need to ensure that economies are sustainable. And all of this has been really highlighted in this current context of COVID-19, where we're witnessed initially prior to COVID, but now increasingly, a destructive situation where indeed technology is playing a significant role. The ability for reinvention is now possible. We see that a lot of education and capacity transfer is done online. And this tornado of change is now what we're now in. And I think that such fireside chats, help us sort of appreciate and understand the different dimensions. And it's only through those different dimensions that you're able to find a synthesis, a way in which we're able to navigate as well as take opportunity towards creating better and more profound change within our education, but also meeting those very values which are essential: access, equity, equality, and relevance. The issues with respect to how internship and mentorships complement education are profound. And I think that while university education systems have been somewhat inward, due to all the dynamics that I've talked about, there is need for an ability to co-create solutions towards promoting access, equity, equality, and relevance. And this can only be achieved through a collaboration of mentorship systems and internship systems. What needs to happen, of course, in such instances when we are engaging externally is that there has to be a value proposition, so that as much as we see mentorship taking place, the mentee gains from mentors, and mentors also gain from the insights of young people who have these very essential traits, where these traits are at the crux of this discussion today. These traits of curiosity, creativity, and resourcefulness in young people. They're born with these traits. And no matter where you go, in the remotest village or throughout the world, you'll see young people having these traits. And it's the educational system from primary, secondary to higher education that needs to nurture these traits. And it's these traits that are the founding value proposition for further mentorship, as well as a value proposition for mentors to gain insights into what people are thinking. Now, let me just illustrate this to you, this thought. Recently, a young boy, Maxwell Akoth, and his partner from Gori County, from Kanga High School, designed a alarm system as a project for the initiative called the Young Scientist Kenya initiative. Now, we all know that alarm systems have been there for a long time, since ancient times. Perhaps, and you had sirens and all those systems. But what these young people did was they designed and implemented new technologies like industrial Internet of Things. They connected this device seamlessly so that the house owner would know exactly when the burglar entered and what he did and so on. They did a bit of research around sensors and other kinds of devices. They adopted and adapted different kinds of technologies to process and so on. They use a little bit of artificial intelligence to see what the different scenarios would be. What they did, in essence, to a mentor, they showed the possibility of how existing technology could be adapted through their research skills and education. And so that value proposition is essential to, for example, Liquid Telecom or Safaricom, who now sees that a young generation is catching up onto the market of IoT. And so that value proposition has to be built into mentorship systems, where young people are able to showcase these traits of curiosity, creativity, and resourcefulness. But then there's a strong commitment by not only the economic sector, but civil society and the public sector to get involved. And if I can continue with that story, then indeed the next phase would be that such innovations would penetrate into policy development, because we can see from a distance that indeed security is all about this interconnection devices, and indeed that would inform policy with respect to communications. So ladies and gentlemen, I think that indeed from this experience, you can see that what needs to happen is that a new system which promotes internship and mentorship has to be developed. The ability for mobility and social mobility in internships and mentorship is absolutely critical, especially at an EAC platform, which brings greater understanding and collaboration. It's some of the things that we want to seek. We want a young person who studies in Kenya, for example, to build a ship in Tanzania, or vice versa. We want to collaborate with respect to that diversity of research capacity. And all of these capacities will be brought about by such initiatives where stakeholders like yourself start creating those systems that promote that community involvement. I'm also part of a mentorship program started by the Asian Foundation, which brings some 400 mentees together with business leaders. And I see a similar interest by way of entrepreneurs appreciating, not only sharing their skills in entrepreneurship, but also providing a context of current business ecosystem with young people who have that ability to then be profoundly inspired in order to take the steps. So these systems are essential, and indeed there are quite a few things and initiatives going on in the country. The need to promote further integration within the East African communities there. We've done this through different initiatives like scholarships and other kinds of key initiatives of excellence in specific areas, all with the hope that the 150 million people and their requirements for education is a lifelong learning. Therefore, the possibilities that the market is there is of no doubt. But and whether we have professors, also of no doubt. But that pipeline of connection is absolutely cool. Thank you. Is anyone there? I'm finished.
Okay, my apologies. I was apparently talking to myself and my colleague here. Dr. Kevit, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. I finished.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. My apologies for that. Now, without further ado, let me invite Dr. Maureen Olel from Maseno University. She is the Dean of the Education Department. Dr. Maureen Olel, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. I'm from Maseno University, the Dean School of Education. And as our theme states today, it looks at the effect of internship programs and industrial attachments, the effect of the pandemic on these attachments and programs in higher education. As we are all aware, for Kenya, we had to close all institutions of learning just about 14 months ago, from sometime in mid-March last year. And we had to, at that point for Kenya, this pandemic was new, and therefore for all learning institutions, students were sent home. And that disrupted a lot of our programs, especially the teaching programs, but even the research programs and community service. As you're aware, the key roles of the university are teaching, to conduct research, and community service. Now we fast forward to moving on to online teaching. So to some extent, and with the challenges that we have in our developing world, a number of our students in the public university come from marginalized areas. So even though in Maseno, we have all our programs with IT, meaning that we ensure that in all curricula, there's a component of IT skills that would enable the students to know how to use this information technology and basically technology and digital platforms. We had both staff and students at different levels of economic ability, as well as different levels of capacity to teach online. And of course, quality issues come in. Quality issues, equity issues because of access to bundles, access to internet connectivity for students who are some based in very remote areas. So other than affordability, there's the issue of accessibility. As we are aware again, like any other institution, when you are not continuing with your core business and yet you're supposed to be earning, and as much as we in Maseno, we are a public institution. It was not easy because even for universities, as you've been reading recently in the dailies, most universities rely on not just capitation from government, but income generating activities. We are of late in the recent past, at least we can go back to 5 years ago, the initial exponential expansion that we saw for parallel or self-sponsored students in the universities that helped generate a lot of money and made the universities reasonably quite vibrant, has drastically reduced. As we talk, a lot of the students who are called to the university are about 15% of those who sit for KCSE. And so even the income generating, which used to come in through these self-sponsored, has greatly diminished. So universities were getting cash strapped because we rely on student fee as well to maintain our labor force. Of course, notwithstanding, our programs had to come to a halt. We managed to try and implement online teaching because we already had for Maseno University an e-campus. So we have certain programs offered to e-learning students. These are students who have been learning even before the COVID pandemic on our learning management system. And they only come for face-to-face. So they were able to continue. But what happened is a lot of our students who are able to sit for even learn and sit for their end semester examinations were not able to proceed, especially the third year students. They're usually taken in for the internships, the industrial attachments. The various schools have organized this. And if I speak for the School of Education, we usually have all our education students as part of curriculum, as part of requirement by the employer, Teacher Service Commission. There is a requirement that they go for teaching practice in schools for at least a term, and that is 3 months. Now, the challenge was for the School of Education, all schools were closed. And so this meant that a lot of the students, a number of the students in our programs, actually maybe we could just say all the students could not proceed with their attachment. So these delays have caused significant pile up. And I would just want to emphasize that we know that education is an investment, and it is also widely recognized that long-term economic growth can only be achieved through investments from highly qualified and skilled workforce. This is also to say that the quality of education is also dictated by quality curriculum. And I've seen Professor Chacha here. I know from the Commission of University Education, as universities, we have to meet those standards that are stipulated. And so we cannot cut corners in whatever program it is, even from other departments. Maybe we can talk of media, technology, we can talk of the School of Agriculture. Everyone was affected. Public health courses and programs have been affected, and for a while could also not access this industrial attachment for their students. So maybe what I'd probably like to share here is that it is time that we come up with innovative ways in which to improve the partnerships between universities and industry. I think for education, it is a kind of given from time immemorial that schools every other year have university students taking the education programs, learning within. And so as we improve this or work at improving the ties, it is not easy, no matter how creative you want to be, to replace the experience, the socialization, that industrial attachment, the skills that a student would readily grasp and learn and master for to enable them to be a qualified professional if they do not interact in that actual space. So I think what has come to our, we have come to realize that there are certain things that you really can't change. You can teach online, you can examine online, you can actually conduct research from a social distance, you can do surveys on phone, but when it comes to the pandemic, the kind of experience, it is, well, we say this has happened once in a century. The COVID pandemic is being compared to the Spanish flu around a century ago. But really, we cannot replace practice in the actual industry or working space that the student is supposed to undertake the kind of training. So maybe what we need to improve on is to encourage our students to do continuous service-based learning where they volunteer constantly so that if we are caught up in a situation like this, they could, we could find that they have already been engaging, and we could be confident enough that they are able to move on. But I think I would want to leave my contribution at this point. Maybe I'll come in later on. But as I also finish, I would want to say that the cost implications for both the universities and the space that has reduced drastically for companies, because a lot of companies, even those students going to hospitality, in the hospitality industries, if you look at those hotels and restaurants and many companies, I think we're all aware, downsized and were working from home. And so a lot of them were not keen because of social distance and because of economic issues to have the students join. So I just want to finish by saying that I've been, I think for the Ministry of Education, for Teacher Service Commission, from the support we've had from stakeholders as a School of Education, we've been lucky that the calendar was able to allow our students when the world opened up, the schools opened up fully in January. So our students have been going for this attachment. And we hope that we'll find more creative ways of engaging them more and more in a more regular fashion. And I think that is all I would like to share for now. But the challenges have been real, and it has delayed a lot of students from graduating and moving into the world of work. Thank you.
Professor Maureen, Olel, thank you so much. First, let me apologize. I called you doctor, and you are a professor.
That's right.
Yeah, apologize for that. I know.
Don't worry at all.
Yes. Sensitive to that. So, Professor, thank you so much for that. I mean, I already have like 100 questions about that and how, we can improve the lot of our universities around, but I'll park that until towards the end. But I also think that Irene from Microsoft will give some insights from a industry perspective. So we look forward to her conversation. But without further delays, I would now like to invite our keynote speaker today, Truphie Kwaka-Sumba. Truphie, I must say, she's a personal friend of mine. We also work together at Longhorn Publishers, which is one of probably the largest publishing house, educational publishing house in the region. So Truphie, we're looking forward to your conversation today. Over to you, Truphie.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so used to calling you Director Ali, or my big brother. And of course to Robert, and thank you so much for this warm invitation. And I trust that where you are, you're keeping things well. I have an interest with the geographical place. Yes. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Desai and Professor Maureen, for your very rich insights. And definitely you have, from just the conversations that you have given so far, I can already see an overlap. And so good evening, everybody. It is such a great privilege to be here and to just share on this important topic of internship, because it's how we prepare ourselves and prepare a ready labor market for our economy and for national development. And so it is a very important conversation. I will just look at a couple of things, and I want to start off by telling us a story. I'm sure all of us are aware or have heard at one time or another, or even watched the movie, The Titanic. The Titanic, of course, was known as the unsinkable ship. And if you know the story of the Titanic, it just so happened that on the 11th of April, as the passengers were enjoying themselves on the cruise, the captain was going about his business to ensure that this unsinkable ship on its maiden voyage would continue and would make history at the end of the day. However, we do know that a day later, what happened is the Titanic sank, killing with it over 1,500 passengers. And when I was thinking about higher education institutions within the pandemic space, I began to think about the Titanic, and I hope that through this presentation, we will be able to get some things that I was just reflecting on. And so really, this is a personal reflection as we think about it. The Titanic, as we know, and some of the theories that have come out, is the fact that it hit an iceberg. At that time, what happened was there was a gentleman who was receiving the messages that was detecting any dangers that was there in the water. But what happened was he was busy sending out messages to the friends and the relatives of the passengers on board. So as he was doing that on that fateful night, the 6th warning that came, he actually missed it. And as the story goes, he never got the opportunity to tell the captain. And by the time they noticed, it was too late. Just like the iceberg that hit and sank the Titanic. So we were faced with the COVID-19 pandemic. On 11th of March, 2020, the World Health Organization announced the pandemic, announced COVID-19 as a global pandemic. I don't know where you were, but I still remember where I was and what I was doing. And I can still remember the confusion that ensued thereafter on every quarter, you know, whether it was to go and buy tissue paper or it was to, to buy masks. In fact, we were still wondering at that time, for those of us in Kenya, where we were going to buy masks and so on. According to UNESCO, by 1st April of 2020, the higher about 43% of higher education institutions were closed, affecting millions of learners across board, just by the confusion and the closure. So globally, we have had the effect. Now we are 1 year down the line and we are still reeling from the effect. For me, when I looked at the pandemic, it's just a tip of the iceberg, because we also live in the age, as we have been told, that we live in an age of continual disruptions. Now, we do know that the concept of the continual disruption comes from the disruptive theory, talking about how technological innovations would completely upset the landscape of business all over the world. We also know from the same that it is known that very small, almost unknown businesses, by use of disruptive technologies, would completely overturn and take over the markets that had been dominated by incumbents. So I think, in my own thinking, is that the pandemic, in a way, although not from a technological perspective, has completely created a further disruption to the global space, but especially in the higher education space, as what we are discussing today. Part of what we have seen, and if you look at the research that is beginning to come out on the impact of COVID on higher education, we know it has disrupted learning overall. However, if you look at some of the research, I think Mawazo Institute has done some research, and this is what they found out, that course or class interruptions in East Africa were up to 81.3%, In West Africa, that was at 85.9%. In South Africa, 88.2%. Of these institutions that responded, of course, majority went closed, majority closed. However, some of the institutions ensured continuity. In East Africa, it was about 43.1%, West Africa, 17.2%, and in South Africa, that was at 40%. Globally, the survey suggested that more than 77% of universities closed as a result of the pandemic. For those that continued, certain questions have been raised. Some of those questions, of course, have already been covered by Professor Olel when she was covering, but some of those are issues around quality assurance, access to technology and the infrastructure, competencies and pedagogies of distance and e-learning, and then the requirements of the specific fields of study. You know, every field, every expertise has a certain requirement on what a student who goes through it is required to cover. And so all those have been impacted by this pandemic. When you look, therefore, at the internships landscape, we look at it, first of all, from the fact that internships traditionally have been taken as a crucial determinant of the readiness of students for the market. You know, Robert, when you began, one of the things you touched on is the fact that although we have had internships traditionally, the employers are actually questioning the readiness of our graduates for the job market. I believe a survey that was done by KEPSA, if I'm not wrong, suggested that it takes up to 6 months for a graduate who has left university to actually be ready because the organization have to retrain them. However, we still have appreciated the fact that internships are crucial in preparing graduates for the job market, because through it, graduates are able to learn, they're able to practice on what they have been learning in the classroom. They're able to bridge the gap between the theory and the practice, but they're also able to learn softer skills and competencies that they need. For example, appreciating organizational culture, learning the other soft skills that make them competent and ready for work. In order to understand how this has impacted, I want to consider the 3 key actors within the internship landscape. The 3 key actors are the industry. We are looking at the organizations. Then we will look at the student or the intern, and then we will look at the higher education institution and the staff who guide the internships there. I want to start off, and maybe I will send this later. Actually, Robert, if you can give me the permission to share my screen, are you able to give me that? If the technical person can do that. I'd like to share this graph.
You have it,
Okay.
Truphie?
Thanks, yes, I can see that now. Okay, I'd like to share this graph. This particular graph is employment trends. This was done in Kenya, data collected in Kenya. And if you look at this particular graph, it shows us something in terms of formal employment. It suggests that, and of course, just what we've been talking about, there's been a decline in all industries across board, apart from financial and insurance sector. so which remained more or less the same. But all the rest, especially when we got to March 2020, and as we continued into the rest of 2020, the decline continued across board. Now, of course, whereas we are talking about internship, this particular trend does have an impact when we begin to think about internship and when we are looking at the internship landscape. Globally, when we look at this globally, the most common response has been to cancel the internship opportunities. And I want to relate this with the fact that if globally, I mean, if just looking at the employment opportunities, they have declined, what we have also seen is that a lot of the internship opportunities, even here on the continent, were canceled. In the US, one study suggests that up to 50%, over 50% were canceled. And this was across all the industries. Of course, the tourism, travel, and education took the hardest hit, with up to 92% of those opportunities being closed. Very interesting. Accounting and legal had the least decline, or with up to 22%, which again corresponds to the employment opportunities that the graph that we just saw, that for accounting or those in the financial sector, although employment declined, it was not with a big margin. We see the same in terms of the accounting internship opportunities. They did decline, but marginally, with about 22%. A study done in Saudi Arabia also suggests that the health sector, this is a study specifically in Saudi Arabia, shows that the health sector opportunities for internship declined about only 35% compared to the year before, were available, with 74% of these opportunities being in the health sector. So what has this meant for the intern or for the student? For the student, we are seeing a delay in graduation. There's been an increase in mental stress because of the delay. Of course, this has a financial impact because of the fact that then their goals for finance, for an income, have been delayed, and that gap has caused emotional stress. There's also been the mental stress and emotional stress about possible infection when you go out for internship. I've had my students calling in to say, you know, mwalimu, or mwalimu is the equivalent for teacher. Mwalimu, what do? We are scared of being infected if we go for internship. And of course, then there's the fact that some of the interns themselves, their health status wouldn't allow them to be out in the workplace because of possible infection, because of their vulnerability. We've also had internships that have been interrupted because of different lockdown programs being put in. We've had some workplaces, the experience I've also had with my students, some students have been put on a staggered internship because of a rota that has been created, where some have to come in at 1 week and another week they're at home. So that lack of continuity has also caused uncertainty. Then there have been shifts due to social distancing, causing longer internship periods. And then for those who are required to work from home, there's been lack of digital access. And of course, some of the students, like Professor Olel mentioned, due to where they come from, marginalized areas, or the lack of access even to the training of how to work from home and the use of digital tools, that has been an impediment. And then of course, then there's been limited virtual internship opportunities, because generally speaking, our education sector has been designed to facilitate a physical internship experience vis-a-vis a virtual internship experience. So largely, I think there's a gap there that research would need to unveil. Then what are some of the impact and the challenges we've seen on the higher education institutions? There's been lack of sufficient communication to and from the university, both to students and from students, and then also to and from the organization. Again, the pandemic really threw everybody off guard. We were caught unawares, just like the Titanic, and just that lack of communication on what do we do now that this has hit us. What do we do with students who needed to go for internship? Then there's a lack of policy guide, excuse me, to guide virtual internships, because traditionally we have structured our education based on brick and mortar, and our internships has been also based on a physical presence at a geographical work location. Then there's a lack of policy framework on how to evaluate remote working. You know, it is only now that we are beginning to even appreciate working from home. Excuse me. Even the university, although we've been teaching it in our classrooms, we also have not really embraced working from home. And so ways of evaluating working from home and a policy or a framework to evaluate that is lacking. And so that again threw the whole internship landscape into disarray or just into confusion, because how then do we evaluate it? And finally, a lot of our faculty are simply not prepared for virtual internship processes where that would be made possible. So lack of information, lack of policy, lack of guidance on how that should happen has happened. I want to shift away now from that, and just to, and on our screen, what I have is the top 10 skills that would be required by 2025. This is from the World Economic Forum as I bring this to a close. According to the World Economic Forum, employers globally suggest that by 2025, these are the skills that are needed: analytical thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, complex problem solving, critical thinking and analysis, creativity, originality and initiative, leadership and social influence, technology use, monitoring and control, technology design and programming, resilience, stress tolerance and flexibility, reasoning, problem solving, and ideation. When I look at this set of skills and bring this to what we are talking about now, the fact that the internship landscape within, and looking at it from how the pandemic has impacted it, it speaks to me that we have a real opportunity for changing and transforming higher education, the framework, the structures, but also when specifically we look at internship, the internship landscape. The skills that are required or are being demanded from us in the higher education institutions, if you look at that list that I provided from the World Economic Forum, are really many of them, and perhaps I should actually go backwards, many of them are
we lost Truphie?
Sorry about that. Let me go back.
Okay.
If you look at those particular skills, many of these skills are not necessarily those that you could you would actually say you're going to teach them. There are things that we need to develop, but they also need to be developed a lot of the times in almost simulated work experience. Either we simulate the work experience within the higher education institutions, or like, and I like what Professor Maureen suggested, that part of what perhaps needs to happen is a continuous hands-on experience that wouldn't throw the learner off guard. And I hope, and so if you look at analytical thinking and innovation, that's really a hands-on skill that is required: active learning, creativity, critical thinking, resilience, and stress tolerance. There's no other way you can teach somebody stress tolerance other than to put them in a situation where they can develop that particular skill. So I'm suggesting to us that the disruption of the pandemic actually gives to us a real opportunity to rethink the internship landscape. What are some of the things, therefore, I suggest, and I'm sure these are not exhaustive, is for us to think about the key skills in demand. What are these key skills that we now need to start developing in our graduates so that they can be ready for the market, because that is the skill that is being demanded by the market. Number two is to think about new ways of working. Of course, we're talking about flexibility of time and place. You know, Director Ali, this is something I know about yourself, and we talk about it many times whenever we are meeting virtually. The fact that work is no longer about a place, a specific place and time. We have new ways of working, and therefore, how can the higher education institutions incorporate this within the learning experience and therefore within the internship landscape? Then thirdly is digital transformation in education. We need to think about how we can improve not only on the learner experience within a physical campus, but really we need to think about how we can improve on the learner experience, both looking at learning and teaching methods that incorporate or that are part and parcel and completely enmeshed in the digital transformation landscape that would enable the learner to experience virtual work. We also then need to think about transferable skill education and mindset, so that as we are preparing our learners, they're not being prepared only necessarily for specific or their respective industries, but being able to be prepared to have skills that are transferable across the spectrum. In the event of a disruption, then they can use those skills effectively across industries, so that, for example, learners who are inconvenienced in the hospitality industry or in the education industry as a result of the lockdown, how could their skills and competencies be in use, say in manufacturing, which has experienced in some countries and in some sectors has experienced an increase in demand, or in accounting and financial services that increased an increase in demand. And then how then do we also shorten the gap between graduation and ready to work and its relevance? How do we shorten that gap? And I think that what the disruption of the pandemic is bringing to us is that there needs to be a shift, a complete shift from brick and mortar education to the digital space of learning. So it's giving us really an opportunity to reinvent a higher education. And I think this can only happen if in the higher education space, we adopt a resilient mindset that is adaptive, ready to learn, but also preparing our graduates for the future of work. The real opportunities, I think, exist, and we can leverage on technology. Of course, we would have to then think about how do we How do we bridge the gap of the digital divide? And some of the opportunities, therefore, that exist is virtual internship, really thinking about virtual internship, thinking about a policy framework, the evaluation of the same, perhaps talking about a sandwich internship rather than an internship at the end of the learning. Can we have a scattered internship throughout a learner's journey of education? We also need to think about cross-industry skills and competencies that are easily transferable. Think about new internship designs and frameworks. And finally, we also need to think about virtual internship policies that would help our learners when we talk about internship. So that is for internship, but overall, the higher education leadership really needs to rethink higher education and make it ready, not to react to crisis, but rather to begin to think about the future and recalibrate higher education structure and framework and policies and propel it into the future. I want to end with this particular saying. It's an African proverb that says, if the rhythm of the drum changes, the dancer must change his dance. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to us that the rhythm in our work and higher education landscape has changed, not only because of the pandemic, but also because of the age we live in. We live in the age of continual disruptions. We therefore, in the higher education institutions, need to change our dance. And technology provides for us an opportunity for that change. Thank you. And I look forward to further engagement.
Thank you so much, Truphie. I am just stopping there with this last slide. If the rhythm of the drum changes, the dancer must change his dance. I love that. I really love that. Thank you so much, Truphie. Much appreciated. Your concise presentation will definitely give the whole education industry food for thought. Before I get Irene on the screen to talk to us about practical approaches, Irene works at Microsoft. I think Irene works at the Africa Development Center, right, Irene? Which basically is recruiting. Last time I checked, you were looking at recruiting about 500 software engineers across the continent.
Correct.
I wonder where you are at. I wonder where you are at. Maybe you can tell us as you come along. I want to leave you, before Irene comes on the screen, I want to leave you with something that a friend of mine, a colleague, crafted, rather sort of created during the height of COVID. He called it COVID-assisted digital transformation, KICTANET in short. So as we move along tonight, at the end of it, we need to ask ourselves, how has the education sector performed as far as KICTANET is concerned? Irene, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for the invitation to be part of today's discussion. Just from the speakers that we've had for the past few minutes, it's really been insightful on what's currently happening in higher education, also views from different industry players. So I'm really delighted to be part of this conversation. And for me, being part of Microsoft within the Africa Development Center, we are heavily invested in the education industry. So a lot of the activities that we do and the engagements that we have focus on how are we really supporting higher education and what are the engagements that are currently ongoing. So as I had just mentioned, I'm Irene Githinji. I am the Program Manager for Higher Education Engagements at the Microsoft Africa Development Center. And the Africa Development Center is a premier engineering organization within Microsoft, where we want that solutions, programs are created in Africa by Africans. And we actually have 2 Africa Development Centers. So we have one in Nigeria and another one in Kenya. So we are about almost 2 years old for Kenya, and same in Nigeria. We launched about the same time. And our main goal and what we really want to do is we have an ambition to get 500 software engineers joining us as full-time hires by 2023. So as of now, we just had our 280th hire, so we're 280 software engineers. We still have a long way to go in terms of what we want to achieve as the ADC. And that is the reason why we are reaching out and partnering a lot with higher education, because the talents that will come to the ADC will be students from higher education with exceptional talent, technical talent, talent that can really support and work with Microsoft to create solutions. And that will be what I'll be highlighting today in terms of what are the practical skills and steps that we are doing as part of the issues that we're facing with students unable to get internships. So within the ADC and our focus with education, this is one thing that we have actually seen as a huge problem. And with the engagement that we have had with various higher education institutions is that, our students are not really able to get attachment, so they lose out on graduating on time or getting the credits that they need. And one of the programs that we have started, which actually just launched a few days ago, is called the ADC Africa Development Center University Mentorship Program. So this is a program where we are working with a few universities. We have launched this as 5 universities. And the program is a 10-week engagement where we work with 20 students from each university, 5 faculty members from each university, and there'll also be 1 Microsoft employee attached to each university. So the way we've structured this engagement is that we want it to be a coaching and mentoring session. So the 20 students that are coming from each university will create 5 teams. Within that team, they will have their own faculty member part of the team, and they will have a Microsoft employee who's a technical employee part of the team. And what we have done in the design of this program is that the students, the faculty member, and the Microsoft employees work together on a certain project for the 10 weeks. So we have structured the course that we have a few weeks of coaching and mentoring. So going through what are the necessary skills needed in today's workplace. So looking at softer skills, looking at the technical skills that you need, and also looking at, as a software engineer, what does that actually look like day to day. And then with this program, what we want to do is we really want to support and work with the institutions on how to upskill students virtually. So this program that we are running as a mentorship program is completely virtual. So we'll be engaging with the faculty and the students virtually. So what we will do is that each of the teams will have specific projects that they will need to work on and then submit back at the end of the 10-week engagement. Now, what we've seen with the universities that we're working with is they want to use this as an opportunity to offer it as an internship to their students, meaning that the students that will go through this program will get credits, and this credits will amount to the credits that they would have received if they had gone out there and had an internship opportunity. Because what we've done with the program is you're able to learn new skills. So if you had, for example, come into Microsoft as an intern, the first thing you would do, you would have some trainings that you'd go through. You'll have a supervisor that is attached to you that you'll be working with in a certain project that you'd work with for the duration of your project or for your internship. So with this program as well, we structured it that way. There's skills that you're going to gain as a student, there's coaching and mentoring that you will receive on a weekly basis. And then there's a project that you will work on for 5 weeks with your Microsoft mentor and with your faculty member, who will also judge and go through your project. And once you've submitted it and it's complete, then you have completed your 10-week engagement as part of the mentorship program. And so that's also formed a basis of universities to look at this program and say, hey, we can actually work with this program and say that the students who go through this program will earn the credits as if they had gone to an internship physically, or if they had been interned in or attached to an organization. And those are some of the things that we are seeing with the engagements that we're doing. As the ADC, what we really want to do and how we are supporting is a lot of our engagements are university and student based. So even with the competitions and the hackathons that we are working on, it's really because we want students to have the necessary skills that they would need if they were to join Microsoft as a software engineer, for example. What would that look like in terms of skilling and in terms of also your abilities, both technical and on the softer side? So that's an overview of what we do in terms of our programs. The internship program, which I've just mentioned, which is the University Partner Mentorship Program, it's on its pilot phase. So we have just started with our May cohort, which will end at around 23rd July. And then we have another cohort starting in September. And we are looking for ways in which we can partner with other universities for the next cohort. We're also looking for other industry players that would want to partner with us on this internship program. For us, it will also be a learning to see if we are running a virtual mentorship program, how will that look like for the students? Are they getting the same value if it was a physical mentorship and they're able to meet with their coach or their mentor? And we also want to see how can we expand and grow the program. Currently, we're only offering it to 5 universities in Kenya. And then we want to see, are we able to scale to 10 maybe in September, and how are we able to scale? And there'll be a lot of learnings that we'll actually get from the 5 universities that we're working with. And that's just one of the practical approaches that we are starting with. So it was a very short presentation because I just really wanted to share what we were working on. If there are any questions, any comments, I know we're probably addressing them at the end of the session, but that is what I actually wanted to share in terms of the Africa Development Center and what we're currently doing in that area.
Irene, thank you so much for that insightful share. We really appreciate, and I would like to ask the participants, I'm not seeing any questions yet, so unless everyone is super satisfied and impressed with all our speakers up to now and there are no questions, then I guess no issue there. But I'm sure a few of you may have queries or comments. Please use the chat function on the platform. It's now time for Professor Chacha, Nyaigotti-Chacha, to speak to us. And basically, it's sort of way forward and solution from an African perspective. And then we will have Nodumo Dhlamini from the Association of African Universities. And then we'll open it up for conversations and comments and questions. Prof, over to you, sir. Professor Chacha, are you with us, sir? You. Okay, I think as we look for Professor Chacha, let's Nodumo, are you there? And I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name properly. Nodumo, would you like to, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible.
You are very audible.
Yes, thank you to AHERI for organizing this excellent platform. I always enjoy being part of these discussions. So congratulations. My name is Nodumo Dhlamini, and I live in Ghana. I work for the Association of African Universities, but I'm originally Zimbabwean. The topic that we are discussing today is of major interest to us as the Association of African Universities. The Association of African Universities is a network of 400 or so member institutions across the continent. So we represent members in the 5 regions of Africa: North, West, East, Central, and also Southern Africa. I think the speakers that have come before me have really brought most of the points that I had put down. So I will say some of the points just as a point of emphasis, but I will not speak for too long. So I think what we are hearing is that the internship programs in Africa have been equally affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and that universities, internship institutions, industries, and African governments were caught unprepared. So at a very short notice, these implementing parties had to think on their feet, and they had to think about what tools they can use, what procedures they should put in place so that they keep the internship programs going on. As the association also, this time I'm talking about the secretariat where I work. We also had an experience which I would like to share. We recruited between 25 and 30 interns during the COVID-19 lockdowns. So they were supposed to do their internship from July 2020 to August 2021. So we are still with them. But then between January this year and end of March this year, there was a need for us to close our office so that we work from home because of some COVID-19 cases in the office, and also because there were a number of positive cases in Ghana. The number of positive cases in Ghana was going up. So we learned some key lessons during these 3 months. The first point was that there are gaps in knowledge among staff at the AAU Secretariat pertaining how to manage interns remotely. This is because our staff had not been trained to implement the systems, the tools, the processes, the procedures for remote internship management. However, as the AAU, we used online meetings, weekly online meetings by department or by unit to discuss work plans and to track progress. We also provided internet bundles to facilitate internet access for the interns. And we found that the performance of the interns varied. Some of the interns took remote working as holiday time, and other interns were more disciplined and accountable to their supervisors and the work that had been assigned to them. We learned that remote internships can be simple to implement, and in some cases they can be harder to implement. And this is because of the different disciplines or work thematic areas. For example, the interns that were assigned to support computer infrastructure maintenance could not do all their tasks remotely. Some problems needed them to be present in person to be able to resolve those issues. Similarly, in other institutions, interns that work in laboratories or hospitals needed to participate in person. So because the pandemic lockdowns were emergency situations, we realized that the induction processes for our interns as the association varied in the different units of AAU, where I work. We learned that both supervisors and interns did not have the experience and the culture to work online. So in conclusion, I would like to share some recommendations which we reflected on as the association. Top of this was the need for to access affordable internet. Interns needed this internet, but we also see national research and education networks as the core institutions that could facilitate robust internet solutions for students, for faculty, and for Africa as a whole. The other recommendation we came up with is that Africa needs to design remote internship procedures, guidelines, and also adopt cool tools for remote working. We need to be talking about how can we implement virtual labs, how can we use tools like TeamViewer to be more effective, how can we create a real life experience for interns that opt to do their internships remotely. Clearly, internship supervisors and interns required orientation and require orientation on how to work together remotely. And more thoughts need to be put. I think we need to reflect more on how to manage discipline-specific internships during a pandemic. Those interns who must continue to physically go to their internship posts must be secured from infection, must be trained how to stay safe as they commute and participate in their role. We believe that technology offers a huge opportunity to train, to mentor, and to inspire interns through virtual internship platforms. And lastly, I think the government of Ghana is doing very well because they are running an impressive internship program for all tertiary education institutions and all tertiary education students here in Ghana. They even pay them an allowance, a modest allowance, while they are doing internship as part of their training. There's an online portal which is being successfully used to keep records of all interns, manage the postings of all interns, and also track their performance through monthly reporting. The link is nss.gov.gh, nss.gov.gh. I think those are my comments. I've enjoyed all the presentations. I've learned a lot from the amazing speakers that spoke before me. And thank you to the AHERI team, and thank you to the chairperson. I will stop here.
Thank you so much. Fantastic summary of what everybody else sort of discussed and presented today. I don't know whether Professor Chacha is back with us. Was. Professor Chacha? All right, Professor Chacha, you have the floor, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. We can hear you. I think it's muted. Are you muted, sir? Would you unmute your?
I'm trying to unmute.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly now.
Okay, I think I have just a few comments. One,
Okay.
I would like to appreciate all the speakers who have spoken. This is a challenging time as far as the entire educational sector is concerned. More so in the university, where we glorify and enjoy face-to-face interaction during the time we are teaching. And because now COVID-19 has made it very difficult for individuals to have a face-to-face interaction, it is a big challenge because we have tried to venture into some methodology on how to ensure that students are learning remotely. But we know technology is not quite advanced in most of our learning institutions. And since also the students are not gathered together, they cannot even have a peer support system. When every student is back in his home or her home, whatever challenges they experience there, they are not able to share with others. But I think it is important for us to, first of all, understand that this nomenclature called internship has not been very clear as far as all the people who use it are concerned. Some people think internship is employment. And because they think internship is employment, they get a lot of challenges when they are engaged in an internship undertaking. We therefore need to appreciate the need for us to have clear policies of what we mean by internship as far as the learning experience is concerned. Whether internship is embedded and is going to be part and parcel of the course requirement before the student graduates, or internship is meant to give that student who has graduated or is about to graduate an opportunity to gain experience in a workplace, a place of work or industrial place, which is related to what that student is learning in the university. I think we need, therefore, to have a structure. And by this structure, we also need to appreciate the fact that we have not standardized internship process. So some students, when they get to an institution where they are on internship, they don't know what they are doing there. And even those who are supervising them do not know exactly what their obligations are. So it is important for us, those of us who are in higher education policy framework, to engage ourselves in the structure this element called internship, since we have realized that it is an ingredient which is very necessary for the student to gain experience. And during this process, we need therefore to have an implementation framework within which internship of various areas of specialization take place. And at the end, we also have to have a structured monitoring and evaluation, so that at the end of the day, when somebody says, I have spent 6 months or 3 months or a month in an organization or an industrial plant, what do we expect to confirm that the intention and the purpose for which this student was given that opportunity to participate in an internship program has been achieved and realized. I think all in all, we need to say that internship is very good. Whether now our challenge because of COVID should also be attuned to understanding that we don't have to always glorify the face-to-face interaction in order for an individual to say, I have gone through an internship experience and I have earned some information or learned some information that is going to be useful for me as I graduate and go to the world of work. My comments would be just that for the time being, and I hope that as we continue in future to converse on a number of these areas, some of us will pick this topic and focus on it in terms of how we can develop viable policies and structure it in such a way that we know what it is, or we know what it means, and we know what we are looking for when people are engaged in an internship program. Thank you very much.
Professor, thank you so much for that, for those closing remarks from yourself. Those are definitely much appreciated.
We can't hear you.
Zoom bombing seems to be my apologies, everyone. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, brilliant. So we have several questions from our guests today. But before we go there, as I was listening to all our speakers today, a number of things, two things sort of have been boiling in my mind, in my head. And one of them has been something that has been in my mind for a while. And since I have a very illustrious group of academicians today, let me pose this to you. And this is from something that Professor Olel talked about how universities are now suffering because fees from students have been reduced. Here's my question. Apart from government funding, should universities rely on fees alone from students? What are other ways of ensuring that universities are sustainable for the future? Because remember, these are not per se businesses. These are institutions of higher learning for public good. And I recall having a conversation a few weeks ago. I have just been appointed to the technical committee of the Kenya National Innovation Agency, which is supposed to look at innovations and ideas coming out of our institutions of higher learning so that we can commercialize them. Can we, this COVID situation, I believe has a silver lining. This is a time for us to now rethink, just like what Truphie has said, rethink the whole higher education sector. What are your thoughts about this? I mean, should we only focus on government funding and fees from students to sustain our universities, and is that sustainable? I'm opening that question to any one of you who would want to go for it.
Yes, let me contribute.
Please go ahead.
This. You ask, the relevance of universities and their importance in society. What beyond, and their sustainability beyond simply fees. If we look at universities today, their professors and students, and the possibility that they have towards promoting links to social, economic, and environmental issues, then what comes to my mind immediately is that what universities have beyond transferring skills and education is research. They have the ability, which is found nowhere else, to promote organized research. You know, they have that ability. It's a technique, it's a technicality which exists within universities. And research is profoundly needed, not only in policy, legislation, regulation, in day-to-day activities and so on, but it's, even if you look at the context of the EAC, now that Kenya is the chair of the East African community, the need to promote intra-trade between our countries, the ability to build markets, the ability to create value chains, the ability to find ways in which we're able to promote social mobility, the ability to look after our ecosystems, our shared resources like Lake Victoria, or the resources that we have been endowed with in a sustainable manner. All of this depends on research. So there's a profound market out there, you know, for research, and research is expensive. You know, it's something that is unique and could definitely propel universities. And I do indeed think that it has to be beyond tuition, but there are additional benefits to research. They inculcate capacities towards those values that we're talking about, you know, relevance and quality and equity and access. I mean, they create the structures beyond simply brick and mortar, the ability for universities to be part of fabric. And indeed, this capacity will always be needed because life is fairly dynamic, and therefore even our existence is dynamic with so many different dimensions that exist. And it's only university systems that can actually, as an institution, have that capacity to, in a free way, promote objective thinking, the ability to link different stakeholders like you're doing today, communities and academics and policymakers and so on a neutral ground. And so I think that, you know, there are many different value chains to university education, research being one of them, skills development being another. The ability to promote lifelong learning is yet to be explored and much needed because of the short cycles of skills, as well as the need for people to be more multidisciplinary, to promote innovation between disciplines and so on. And so I think that, you know, the horizon is of a huge magnitude. It's, you know, the promotion, the ability to create this, these foundations that matter most at this particular moment. And it's probably the reason why economies in Africa struggle and social structures struggle. And it's because of that lack of link. And so I think that indeed, there's a lot of potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kevit. Anyone else wants to add on to that before we go to the next comment question?
I want to contribute on the same.
Sorry, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Festus Otieno.
Are you part of the speakers?
Not really. I'm a participant.
Okay, would you let me just get to my speakers first, and then I'll come to the guests, if you don't mind.
It's okay.
Thank you. Any other comments from the speakers?
Maybe I could say a word or two.
Yes, please.
I think I'm happy to hear that you are part of a team that's looking at innovative ways to improve funding options for universities, or ways in which they can get finances. Now, research has been, research is one of our core objectives. But a lot of times we are, as university faculty, a lot of the funding, unfortunately, come from calls that are from the developed world. So we sometimes are carrying out research whose objectives or priorities are not necessarily our national priorities. So I do believe that we have very many faculty members who are very passionate about research. And really, research in itself is not what should bring funding to the universities, but the output of this research should. So there should be what we are calling policy-oriented or evidence-oriented policy encouraged at the national level. I know we have the National Research Fund, but really what I think there should be what we call the government, the universities, and the industry, maybe what they would call a PPP, public-private partnership. They should come together. Like if right now we have the Big Four agenda, housing, food security, health, and someone help me with the fourth one. But we have the the Big Four agenda. And if this is a priority, I would suggest that these calls are sent out, and researchers from the various scholars, intellectuals from within the country compete for this, and they would be able to inform and come up with evidence-based, they come up with research that gives evidence to the kind of policies we'd implement and what would befit our community, our nation. So research is good enough. But for the public universities, they're not as autonomous as they probably would want to be. I think if we look at the West, some of the, like the Harvards, the Yales, they are largely private universities. So we can debate on and on about this. Yes, universities, I think this is a good place to be because we are being challenged to think out of the box. But from research, and I'm just finishing, we have what we call the privatization theory. And privatization theory states that privatization leads to greater equity, greater output, and greater efficiency. So I think in a nutshell, maybe this could be expounded in another forum, we should privatize probably everything that we do. If we have a school, a medical school, let's have the teaching. If possible, let's have what KU came up with, a hospital, a working hospital. I think this needs a lot of input initially, but if well managed, then you could be making your money, you could be having your students practice there. We have universities with hotels. They could do the same, train their students, use the same for practice, at the same time generate income. Same for schools. Again, Kenyatta University, I had a school within. So I think if allowed, the options and possibilities are endless. So I think I'd want to leave it at that, but let's think about the privatization theory and check if it really works, find out if it really works.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Really appreciate those comments. There was a gentleman who came in. Truphie, yes, you want to say something?
Yeah, a quick one. I an additional one, when you talked about research, so I'm coming from a private university perspective where we really we run the university from our sources. So we really do not depend on government, although we do have government students, sponsored students, we do not depend on government capitation to run the university. We depend on students whom we recruit, but we also have to raise our own resources. Actually, the Commission for Higher Education, for University Education, requires us to demonstrate that apart from tuition fees, private universities run or have other sources of income. And when we have the institutional audits that are conducted every 5 years, that is a requirement because of the risk that is inherent when you have total income on tuition fees. Having said that, I think there's an aspect also that we can develop. Professor Olel talked about having public-private partnerships coming into space, but we also then should have industry beginning to put aside money for certain research issues. For example, the banking industry could say, we have this problem, or we are looking into trends, or we are looking into 5, 10, 20 years. What should we be thinking about? Different industries can come together and put money and say, we want research to be done to be able to solve a real business problem. What that would do is that institutions, research institutions, universities would actually begin to tailor their research agenda around industry problems and begin to come up with solutions. So we actually need that partnership between industry and institutions of higher education. We could even have questions of management and how do you manage people, or, there are various questions we could ask, but because those questions are being raised within the African context, then the solutions would actually come within this context. And I think when we do that, when money is availed for research to be done, then we as researchers in higher education would rise to the occasion and be able to meet that need. I'll tell you what, Director Ali, part of the reason why you cannot find a lot of vibrant and research, although it is really coming up now, is of course the challenge that as a researcher, I still must put food on my table. So I'm stuck between doing research and teaching. So which one do I want and which one will put food on my table? So those are also the practical issues that must be addressed within the total industry as we are looking at innovation and as we're looking at relevant research.
I think I agree with you. And let me just say something. We're already starting to see this happen. The IBM Research Institute at Catholic University, I think, is among less than 10 worldwide that IBM decided to house in Nairobi. And I think there were a number of universities were asked to pitch for that. So we're already starting to see that happen. I think you talked about soft skills, Dr. Truphie, you talked about soft skills. One of the things that we must appreciate, one of those skills that must be within the university faculty is sales and marketing. You're not going to get research money if you're not marketing yourself, if you're not saying this is what we can do. I feel that society is not doing what it should do. Universities are doing their part, but I think society also needs to bridge that gap between industry and universities. Robert, you had something you wanted to say?
Yes, I think just to weigh in a bit on the conversation on funding, there are two things that we need to think about. At systemic level, we need to think of the theoretical background or educational philosophy of the country. Do you view education as a public good? And as such, then research should be purely for research sake, as in basic research, and we don't have to consider looking at the return on investment in the short term for research, and that will guide the triple helix, or the combination of academia, industry, and government, to determine, based on relevance of development needs or sustainable development needs of our country, that the theme or the call for proposals are guided by that we want to develop the country. We want to solve our problems. And so the industry, the academia come together to seek solutions. And these solutions need not be pegged on either time or that there's a return on investment. I hear Professor Olel speak about privatization or neoliberalism, as it were. But the question is, at our level of development, will we liberalize or will we privatize at the expense of access? Because once you start talking about privatization, then there's an element of cost. There's also an element of quality, because then the cost will determine the quality. But it is, I believe, an opportunity for all of us to seek a solution. And this presents us that platform, that a conversation going forward will be, how do we solve the problem of sustainability of higher education? Definitely, it is not, it's not something for the government only to come up with. And universities cannot run on school fees. It's not sustainable. And for the industries also, as Dr. Kevit says, that looking at the regional opportunities, if all companies can come together and not look at just the market in Kenya or the market in Tanzania, what opportunities do we have as a region, and pushing it further? And that's why AHERI was formed, looking at the whole of Africa. We have a lot of interdependency. Not necessarily that a problem or Kenya could have a good solution, but they will not be able to implement it here, maybe in another country. So that interdependence within the region is also necessary. And if we consider the region, we consider our competences, therein lies a solution to funding for sustainable development.
When we're talking about alternative funds, let us just spend a bit more time here, because what you've said is absolutely correct. You've talked about looking at it from a systematic perspective. You talked about, you know, bringing that coordination of private sector, academia, government. When we're looking at alternative funding sources, what we need to focus on, ladies and gentlemen, is the market. It's the market that determines, you know, the potential of the contributions to make as far as research is concerned. And so we need to create an ecosystem. We need to create an ecosystem in a systematic way which addresses, like you said, policy, legislation, regulation, standards towards research. We need to promote the coordination, exactly what you said, you know, the ability to bring innovation, the ability to bring capacity. And it's only when we have that ecosystem will we have a market, and ultimately then enable you to fully promote with a high level of proposition and value to that very essential skill of gathering data and making analytical decisions, etc., and so on. So as far as the demand is concerned, there's a big demand, but there's a missing pipeline between, and that's the system that has to be created now. And it can only be created through such platforms like this, where you're bringing all the different stakeholders together. You're making decisions based on the kind of research, the standards, etc., the policy levels, the legislation required, the regulatory environment. And then that opens up a totally new opportunity for universities to engage freely. Otherwise, if you are an academic at this particular moment, then it's almost like a desert out there. I mean, who's going to buy your research, at what value, and what is the target, and what is the outcome? All of these questions come in, and it's extremely daunting. And so it's the realization from platforms like this and their ability to make decisions to create that ecosystem. I think it's possible because on both ends you have a situation, and what you need to do is just create that ecosystem that would benefit. And the contextual issue, it's true that we spend a lot of funds from external research and a lot of money in terms of organizations like, there's so many organizations, foreign organizations doing research, which could ordinarily be done locally, through our local capacity and better informed. In fact, these foreign organizations actually use researchers from your institutions. And so I think that it maybe at this time, such a platform, such a foundation should create those links, should create that capacity. I mean, even if I look at my existing work, I mean, we're far from, reaching the full potential. So I really encourage you, to have the confidence to develop that ecosystem if it doesn't exist.
Thank you, Dr. Kevit. And I think we are running out of time now. We're running out of time, so we have just time for Irene to answer some questions from the guests. Irene, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Great, Irene. So 2 questions that we'll give, and then I will hand over to my colleague Robert to close. I'm really sorry, everyone who may not have had an opportunity to ask questions, but I encourage you to connect with our speakers, connect with Robert, connect with me offline using social media. Truphie did mention about leadership and social influencing. So this is one of the critical skill sets going forward. So I'm hoping that we will continue to have this conversation beyond today. So 2 questions to Irene. Irene, what are the requirements for an institution to be part of the mentorship program? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is the program open also for diploma level students? In fact, let me just add onto it. Apart from diploma level students, I think the big tech companies, which Microsoft is one of them, I think today they are called FAMGA. So FAMGA, F-A-M-G-A, F standing for Facebook, A for Amazon, M for Microsoft, G for Google, and A for Apple. These 5 major tech companies in the world today have actually said, we're actually going to hire people who even don't have university degrees. Irene, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start with the question on, why we chose or why we are only working with universities as of now. So the program is actually a pilot that we started. And the reason we chose higher education was because we were looking for institutions that Microsoft already has an existing relationship with. So with the Microsoft education team, the local education team, they already have engagements that they are pursuing with universities in Kenya. And that was the reason why we started with higher institution. For the next cohort and the next phases of the program, we are definitely going to look outside of just university. One of the key areas that we want to go through is the TVET space as well, and also self-taught engineers. We know that they are exceptional people who have taught themselves different programming languages, and they're really good and really skilled. But some of the key questions is, how do we actually find these people? How do we reach out and start working with them? So that's also another key area for us as the ADC that we want to pursue. So for us, this first pilot, it's for us to learn what will actually work in terms of a virtual mentorship program, how are we able to scale, and then moving forward, we'll be able to have different avenues that we will get and recruit students or even recruit individuals to join the program.
Thank you, Irene.
Both questions with that, or did I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
you have, Irene. Thank you so much. And with that, good people, I'm going to hand over to Robert. Robert, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ali, for guiding us through this insightful discussion. Distinguished speakers, presenters, and participants, I take this opportunity to say a very big thank you for creating time and for even sharing your knowledge and insights onto this very important topic. Indeed, as the rallying call for AHERI during our conferences and colloquia is that we will turn ideas into action. There are great ideas that have come. We would like to take this conversation forward. I know as our keynote speaker, Truphie Kwaka-Sumba had said, that the beat has changed, and so the dance must change. And we are taking the COVID-19 pandemic as not only a challenge, but as an opportunity for us to change some of the issues or some of the challenges that are facing the higher education sector. We will definitely take the conversation further. We look forward to engaging you. There shall be a document of the proceedings of this fireside produced, and we shall share this. Please, we invite you for the next activities for AHERI. We have a high-level discussion on funding on higher education. It wasn't planned. The question came up in June and in August, and we'll invite you for that. Kindly block your calendar for that. And in October, we will close the calendar of activities with a conference on partnerships as a solution for the challenges in higher education. With that, I'd like to say thank you to all the speakers. I'd like to say thank you to our team behind the scenes, led by Director Barry and his team. And a special thank you to Professor Chacha and Dr. Kevit, who I know with their busy schedules have always worked with us. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Yeah, we have a group photo.
Could we have a group photo, please? Just put on your cameras, and we will take one photo for memory.
You're going to do the cascade.
From here. You ready? Ready? Okay. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you, and all the best from us.
Thank you.
From Kisumu.
Kisumu Dala.
Kisumu Dala.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Please put it on this one.
Wonderful.
Ali.
Good.
Well handled.
Don't hear that. It's always when we have interesting conversations, they never end. I think it's